Well, hello viewers, another episode of the Nanaya West Show. Today I have a very important personality with me,
Oh,
Asante
I appreciate.
Haughton. Ah,
Yeah. How you doing?
Asante. I
Yes. How
am
you doing?
doing great. I am
Wait.
doing great. Even just your name sends me to the moon and back. You know why?
Why is that?
Because aside from your name being Asante Sana, as in thank you in Kiswahili,
Mhm.
my background is Asante as well,
Really?
Ghana. So it's like,
Okay.
okay, yes,
All right.
yes, yes,
Wicked, wicked,
yes,
wicked,
yes.
wicked. I had a
So
feeling in. I had a feeling.
you had a feel.
Something told me.
The ancestors were speaking to you.
Always.
Yay. Nice, 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 nice. I have Asante with me in the studio, and today's session really I termed power of storytelling. And this program really has been about storytelling to inspire, to motivate. So when I found you and I had a little bit, heard a little bit of your story, I said, no, this is key. Many people need to hear this story. People who are not fortunate, or my subscribers who may not know you, should be able to have the opportunity to hear your narrative. So tonight we have two-time TED speaker Asante Haughton with us. He is a mental health advocate, a performance poet, a storyteller. Man, I'm so happy to have you on this podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a
Akwaba.
it's an honor. It's an honor. Asante.
Oh,
Hold on. Sorry,
something
sorry.
happened. Okay.
You
He's
got me?
back. Yes, 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 yes. I got you.
Hold on, hold on.
Yeah.
I can't hear you. One sec, one sec.
Okay.
What is happening here? Okay, I'm back. Sorry, a call came through and it threw the whole thing off. That's my bad. I apologize.
Oh, yes, that's okay.
Yeah,
So Asante Hilton, thank you
that's,
for coming onto the show. Thank you for
of
saying
course,
yes.
of
It's a
course,
privilege to have you.
of course.
So,
So,
did I do justice to your background?
sorry?
Did I do justice to you?
Oh,
Because I feel like
absolutely.
there's more to you that, and I'm missing that.
No, the funny thing is I don't really like to do my resume. I like to tell the story and to talk about what I'm passionate about because ultimately a resume, what is that really? Just a way to show off to people or to make yourself seem more credible. But I think if you're credible, the message it should show that credibility rather than whatever you've done for the past 10 years of your life. I mean, I've done a lot. Don't get me wrong, but the most important
Well, Google doesn't lie.
thing. I hear there are multiple
YouTube ain't
pages.
lying too.
YouTube ain't like, yeah, I'm on
Yes, yes,
Wikipedia now
yes.
too. That's interesting. So
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah.
So, my dear, let's
Hmm.
get to the nitty gritty
Yeah.
of this conversation.
Let's jump
Mental
into it.
health, Black men, mental health. It's like storytelling. Maybe before we start, I need to put you on
Yeah.
the spot. Drop some
I'm ready.
lyrics.
Oh, you want me to drop lyrics? Oh man,
Yep.
okay. All right, I'm gonna do a poem that I like to do when I talk to young people. So
Cool, cool,
actually,
cool.
yesterday I was talking to some young people. So, anyways, here's the poem. I'm gonna try not to be too loud because I have neighbors. But it goes, um, dreams are wasted through confusion. Empty lives are filled with nothing but hope for life's conclusion. But the strength of spirit and unwavering faith of humans provides obtrusion for suicidal delusion. Instead, perseverance is determined to find a solution. Hit with the realization that reclusion was not the solution for my suicidal delusion, as it only impeded my progress in social institutions. I sifted through the mental pollution to find the remedy for my soul's contusion. Through laughter and amusement, I was finally able to enjoy life's music. Once taken for granted, now I try to use it, but sometimes fall back into the pit where I foolishly abuse it. Now I've been beat down by life, but I've lived through the bruises, only to realize that whether Christian, Islamic, or Jewish, Hindu, Sikh, or Buddhist, that you need to open your ears in order to hear life's music. So
Mm,
that's what I
mm,
got for you.
mm,
That's what I
mm,
got for you.
mm, mm. That is great. You got to open up your ears to hear life's music. Man.
Yeah.
And I also picked up perseverance.
Hmm.
Perseverance. You got to persevere. Man.
Definitely.
Okay. So
Yeah.
before we get to all the hard stuff, all the deep stuff,
Yeah.
let's get to your beginning story. Right?
All right.
Because for most of us, our beginning narratives influence as to who we are,
Hmm.
where we are at this point in our lives. So, what is your beginning story, Asante?
I mean, the first thing is I was born in Jamaica, and I think because my name
Ah,
confuses a lot of people because I was born in Jamaica and not West Africa. But anyway, but I was born in Jamaica to Jamaican parents, and I came to Canada.
maroon.
I mean, my mom's side, there's the descendant for sure. My father actually, he's mixed with Chinese blood, so it's interesting. So
Wow.
if you look closely, I have some of the features, but but you have to look real close. But anyway, um,
Mm-hmm.
came to Toronto, Canada when I was a kid, 2 years old, and then my parents split when I was young, when I was about 5 years old. Uh, Spent several months in the shelter system, and then my mom got a job. We moved out, and I had a lot of challenges in like the elementary school period of my life, but I was also super happy. I had a lot of friends. I was super tight with when you just kind of feel like you have community. You know those ones.
Yes,
So
yes,
that's
yes.
really how I felt, despite like poverty and challenges with my dad not being there as much as I would have liked for him to be there. My mom was working all the time, so I didn't really see her a lot. But
Mm.
I was doing well in school. I was doing well in sports. I was doing well with people. I was doing well in every other aspect of my life. So I had a really happy childhood. Like sometimes when I'm struggling as an adult, I'm like, man, if I could only just be 10 years old again. You know what I mean? Right?
and, and that's when we say we want to grow old, and when we get older we wonder, is this what old age is about? No, we
Exactly.
don't want to be part, we don't want to grow old. Yes, that's
Absolutely.
wonderful. Yeah.
Absolutely. But yeah, so I mean, that's where it started. I don't know if you want me to keep going. Should I keep going?
Yes, please keep
Okay.
going.
All right. Now I'll keep going. So I would say the first 11, 12 years of my life, despite the challenges, they were really good. Then when I was 13, that's when things started to really, go in a different direction for me. It started with, my mom coming home one day and she was crying, which I'd never seen my mom do at that point in my life. Like family members that passed away, it didn't matter. She like, stoic all the time, held it
Yeah.
down. And then she was crying. And anyways, essentially she was crying because my father had, and for anybody listening, I have permission to share these stories from both of them. But yeah, my father had been, essentially, I mean, stalking is a strong word, but if there's a level below stalking, that's what was happening, right? Um,
Mm.
so my mom, I guess, became very fearful, and so we had to move from one project to another project, and that's what happened. So we ended up moving across the city very abruptly. Like once my mom delivered this news, 3 weeks later, we were living somewhere
Yeah.
else. Yeah, yeah, and then 2 weeks later, I was starting high school in a new community.
Wow.
So a lot was happening really fast for me. And that was really
Yeah.
challenging because when you're a kid, that transition from, elementary to high school is huge. And
Mm-hmm.
when you're not bringing friends with you to that transition, that's hard. So I had to make new friends, which I was
Yeah.
able to do. So I was happy I was able to make new friends in grade 9. And then everything was kind of going okay. And then the summer after grade 9, you know, one day we get this knock on the door. Me and my brothers were watching soccer because sports fans, right? So, so
Not cricket, soccer.
yeah. Well, I don't really. Some Jamaicans like cricket and some like soccer.
Yes.
We're the soccer Jamaicans. I mean, so, so we're
Yes.
watching. So we're watching soccer, and we get this knock on the door, and I go to open the door, and essentially there are these two men in uniform saying they're looking for my mom. So this is weird to me. Go upstairs, open my mom's bedroom door, and she's there. She's crying again, saying that essentially she's just very overwhelmed by life and didn't know what to do and how to
Yeah.
move forward, right? Um, so then they zoomed her away in the ambulance. They kind of did their little checkup. They gave her a prescription for antidepressants. Boom. For us, we're like, okay, she's got her pills now. She's gonna be nice. Like, whatever is going on, it's handled. Unfortunately, that was not the case. So, fast forward to my grade 10 year. Not only was I dealing now with my mom who was struggling with her mental health, but all of my friends that I made from grade 9. Now, I should preface this by saying my high school was not the best school in terms of, I mean, it wasn't a bad school, but sometimes kids get stigmatized because of the challenges they have in their environment. So
Yes. Yes.
the school just had a lot of kids who were dealing with challenges. So anyway, all of my friends from grade 9 dropped out of school by grade 10.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So like 10 guys just all dropped out. Um, and so then again, I had no friends at school because these guys started to, I mean, some people were using drugs, some people were selling them, is the best way to.
Whoa.
So yeah, trust me,
Whoa.
it was a
Whoa.
wild
Whoa.
time for me.
Whoa.
So,
Whoa.
um, and then my mom was at home and she was working two jobs, so I didn't see her very often. And then beyond that, working the two jobs started to impact her mental health more and more and more, until eventually it went from depression to something deeper. And the first sign was, if anyone's been around people who start to like hear voices and stuff like that, the first thing you notice is their eyes start to change. Like some people say it's a vacant look, but it's almost like they're looking through you, or they're in the room, but they're not in the room. They're somewhere else in their head.
Yeah.
Uh, so that started to happen with my mom, and then she started to have delusions, paranoia, visual hallucinations, imagining people were watching the house, auditory hallucinations, so hearing voices. Um, and because she's very intelligent and very rational, she was sort of trying to convince us, the kids, that this stuff was really happening. And when you
It
connect it,
was.
it
We
was,
just
you know what I mean?
didn't. Yes.
Right? And so when you like connect the dots, it's like everything she's saying is true. All the conspiracies is true because they made sense the way she was explaining them, right?
Yes.
But at the same time, you're like, then how come the police haven't shown up yet? Yeah, you know what I mean? So it became this thing where it's like it's believable, but it's not. But I'm 15 years old at this time. I'm really confused. I don't know what's going on, right?
Hmm.
So for me, I just started to worry a lot
But
about.
as a child too, how were you coping with your mental health? How was all this impacting you? Because
Hmm.
it you seeing it, it's
Yeah, I wasn't coping at all. If I'm being real, like, I mean, a lot of people say, "How come you didn't start smoking weed and drinking?" And it's because I couldn't afford it. You know what I mean? Like, because
because
I just didn't have the money. I didn't have the resources. You know what I'm saying? So, uh,
thank goodness we
right,
wouldn't be having this conversation
right. I'd be in
today.
a different zone right now. Um, but
Yes.
for me, what ended up happening was I started to isolate myself,
Mm,
because I was ashamed of what was happening with my mom. I was ashamed that our family had this issue in our family, and I was ashamed of myself for also experiencing what I didn't even know at the time was depression and anxiety and even
mm,
paranoia. I experienced a lot of when I was in high school. I didn't know what any of this stuff was. it's weird. It's like being in a room when and then all the lights are on, and then something happens and the lights go off, and you can't turn them back on again, no matter what you do. You're looking for the switch, but there is no switch, and that's kind of what it felt like for me at the time, just not really knowing where to go, how to handle what was happening. So I became, when I was a kid, I used to go outside every day. Like, you couldn't keep me in the house. I used to get in trouble for coming home late, and I was that kind of kid. And then I became this kid who was the opposite, who, my brothers started to ask me, how come you're not going outside no more? I mean, they're a little bit more harsh, but they're like, yo, like, what's going on with you? Like, well, go outside, bro. Like, what's wrong? You know? Um, but it was the anxiety and the shame and the depression that was making me like, uh, you know, I stopped playing sports. I was just like, I'm gonna stay inside and just play video games and watch movies and read books you know. And now that I work in mental health, I meet a lot of parents who come to me and they say their teenager doesn't want to leave their room or doesn't want to leave the house, and they're like, "What's wrong with them?" And but because I've had the experience, I'm like, it's not that they're lazy or they lack motivation. It's that there's probably something deeper emotionally that they're experiencing that maybe they don't know how to communicate, or
Mm-hmm.
they're afraid to communicate, right? Now, I didn't have the words for what I was dealing with at the time. I wouldn't be able to say I'm experiencing depression or anxiety. I wouldn't even be able to say that I'm sad because it didn't, like, depression for me. I mean, there's a sadness aspect to it, but it's not even sadness. It's more like hopelessness. Like, there's
Mm-hmm.
no reason to live. It's not like I was sad all the time. It was just, why am I doing this? Life sucks. There's there's nothing to look forward to. My mom is sick. I'm very poor. My neighborhood is dangerous. Racism is everywhere around me. You know,
Mm.
and so it's like, what is the point of even trying when life keeps hitting me with these punches? So that's kind of how it felt for me.
And any support from relatives or your father or
No, my father wasn't around at all because once we moved, severed all contact with him for years. He ended up finding me later on, like 8 years later, on the internet. But I literally had no contact with him or his side of the family for 8 years. And then the rest of my mother's side of the family were all back home. So there was no family, zero.
oh goodness.
So it was just my two older brothers who somehow managed to pay the bills and, keep everything afloat. But my mom was at this point pretty much incapacitated. She couldn't work anymore. So I mean, I was poor before, but we went from being like, when you're poor, but you can still like,
Be
you know,
happy to dirt
yeah, yeah,
poor.
yeah. I went,
Nothing.
I went from like poor to like nothing, where I started, shoplifting for food and medicine and things like that because that was the only way to get certain things, clothes, right? Um, and so I mean, I'm not even proud of that, but it's just the realities of it. So like, I had all these challenges going on, and then my mom got worse and worse and worse. She started hearing voices more and more, and more delusions, more of all of this, and eventually, my brothers and I we saw that she stopped eating and she wasn't sleeping, so we kept trying to get her to go to the hospital, but she's not thinking straight at the time. Uh, so we called the ambulance. I mean, we called the ambulance a lot, but what's interesting about the medical system in Canada? Free healthcare. We always say free healthcare, right? The problem with free healthcare, and this is my own opinion, I have to disclaimer. So, if I get canceled, it's just me. But, but, but the thing, you know,
I work in healthcare, so I want to know your opinion
so,
of that.
so there we go. My opinion is that, when healthcare is free, the
Mm-hmm,
volumes are higher that healthcare
mm-hmm,
practitioners have to see. So
mm-hmm,
because of that, they may not have enough time to really
mm-hmm,
explore the challenges that people show up with unless the challenges are extremely serious, right?
mm-hmm,
So my mom went to the hospital about 4 times before we ended up at the last time that she went to the hospital. Because the first 4 times she was bad, but she wasn't bad enough for them to keep her. They're like, you know what, prescription, take the pills, the kids, you do
So,
what you need to do to support her, and then
so
try.
this is what I'm going to tell you. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's who you meet in there in emergency or whatnot, and understanding of this is one of my personal focus.
Mm-hmm.
Black people, and people of color accessing, but let me say black people
Yeah.
accessing health, the way black people are viewed, and the how our issues are translated into services
Hmm.
often tend to be different.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So these unconscious biases and racism within our healthcare systems
Absolutely.
that many of us are not aware of. But that is one thing that within my professional practice, I'm very, very much aware of, that the language we use, the perceptions we have, the type of care we give, and listening to the full story.
Hmm.
The best thing that works for me within healthcare is because of my understanding of the power of narratives. I want to hear your story, and
Okay.
that gives me deeper understanding of what you are presenting, irrespective of race, color, socioeconomic class, etc. It gives me a better understanding of what you're presenting and what care you need. But
Hmm.
unfortunately, our system doesn't work that way. So I can see where easily sometimes people will fall through the cracks. And many people fall through the cracks.
Many people, and that's you know most likely what happened with my mom because, like, I don't know, when you're rushed to the hospital 3 times in a year for suicidal ideation, you would think after the third time maybe they say, let's keep you for 72 hours, you know, right? But that didn't happen until she got so bad that she ended up in the hospital for 2 months,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's so we called the ambulance. They saw how bad she was because at this point she had lost a lot of weight. So it wasn't just the mental issues. She physically looked extremely unwell. And
Mm-hmm.
so they took her directly to the hospital. They sedated her. She slept for about, I don't know, a couple weeks on
Oh,
sedation.
wow.
Yeah, yeah. So she was awake, or she slept for about 2 weeks on sedation, and then she wasn't able to eat solid food for a month because again she had not been eating properly for a long time. So she
Mm-hmm.
was malnourished, and they had to help her to start
Yeah.
eating food again. And then after
Mm-hmm.
that, they hooked her up with a whole bunch of specialists and every kind of medical mental health practitioner you could imagine was involved. There's I think 6 or 7 different people involved in her recovery, but it was worth it at the end of the day. I was complaining
Yeah.
about free healthcare, but at the same time, it was very
Yeah.
helpful because
Yeah.
by the time she got to that point, she was able to meet some of the right people,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Mm-hmm.
she started to get better pretty rapidly. By the time all this was going down when I was about 16 years old. By the time I was 21, 22, you would never
Mm-hmm.
even know that she had a mental health issue before.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
she got
wow.
better. Yeah, she's doing a lot better now. So I'm happy to say.
That's great. That
Yeah.
it's great to hear. It's great to hear. So back to you.
Yeah.
Words, storytelling.
Yes.
For many of us will think the stigma, we don't want to talk about it.
Hmm.
What does stigma mean for you, and what is this storytelling, telling your story mean for you?
I think stigma is the shame that we give other people and the shame that we give ourselves for an issue that is not our fault. That's the way I see it, right?
Mhm.
Like nobody chooses to have a mental health challenge, right? Nobody wants to have a mental health challenge. Nobody wants to live with that. It's a hard thing to manage. And even if it's not a hard thing to manage, other people think that you're some kind of pariah or you did something wrong to make this happen to you. And it's like none of that stuff is true. It's just, I heard a rapper say one time, Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're talking about that. And I remember one time I was so exhausted, stressed. I said, I'm booking away a hotel. Nobody should call me. Nobody should contact me. I don't want to talk to nobody. I
Mhm.
left my kids in the house, went, booked myself, checked myself into a hotel,
Yeah.
slept overnight because
You
I
know,
was working 2 jobs.
and you know what's funny is that like I get that. Sometimes all you need is just space and sleep and peace of mind, you know?
Yeah. Oh
Right.
my goodness. It was very necessary. And then some shopping, how do we call it? Some shopping on the credit card, which I dealt with later.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Shopping therapy with no money.
But it was good for you, wasn't it?
It was
Right.
great. It was awesome. I
And
needed that. I
and that's
needed
the
that.
important thing is that when you need something, you have to
Hmm.
invest in what you need, right? And a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
us, it's easy to say, I need to go to work today because if I don't go to work today, I'm going to lose, the hours, or I
yeah,
need to, show up for this person's party because if I don't show up, they're going to be mad at me, or I
yeah.
need to, whatever it is, right? But ultimately, if you show up to work or you go to the party that maybe you don't feel well enough to go to, or whatever it is that you end up doing instead of taking care of yourself, and then you
Hmm.
fall over sick, then you
It's
can't take care of
true.
nobody. You can't take care of
It's true.
yourself. You can't take care of your kids, friends, family. Excuse me, nobody. Right. So, and that took me a long time to learn. I'm not saying like it wasn't like I just woke up like this. You know what I mean? Like it took me a long. Like when I say long time, like I would being involved as in mental health for as long as I have been,
How many
I,
years now?
almost 15 years now. So I know it doesn't look like it, you know what I'm saying? But
I know. It ain't cracking.
hey, trust me, black don't crack. So, but yeah, being
Yeah.
real, yeah, just it took me. I've been preaching this stuff for 15 years, but it
Hmm.
probably took me about 14 years to start like until I started to live the stuff I was preaching with respect to making sure I take care of myself. Because I thought,
There's always a switch, a period when it occurs to you that you need to start taking care of yourself. For me personally, my switch came in after a traumatic event in 2009, and
mm,
that is when, for instance, my language start
mm,
changed and added a little bit f bombs into my language, like
mm.
f this. I need to take care of me. And then started really looking at me. When did that, switch happen for you?
Yeah, so if I'm being super real about it, I've never actually talked about this publicly yet. But here
Then we are having that
we'll
conversation
talk about it right now.
here.
Um,
Asante and Nana Yayabwa are having this conversation. Hmm.
Conversation right now. Um,
Yep.
about a year and a half ago now, my wife and I separated, and that was a big wake up call for me. Because
Mm,
one of the issues was I was working too much, and
mm,
and it wasn't just that I was working too much and I wasn't spending time with the family because I was still carving out time for the family. But when you work too much, sometimes you're so tired mentally and
mm-hmm.
physically that even when you're with your family, you're not with your
With
family,
them. Yeah.
right? So that's what was happening. So and so I mean, I felt like I was, taking care of business because I was making a lot of money, for a little while, and
Mm-hmm.
I was balling out. I was, hey, you want to go on vacation? Let's go on vacation. You know what? Courtside seats, let's do it. As because I was working so hard.
You were speaking different languages.
I that's a perfect way to say it, right? And then, but here's the thing: is luxury items is not the same as quality interaction,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
And then I started to not be emotionally available
Mm,
because I was sinking so much of my time and energy into
mm-hmm.
work, and my work is very taking care of other people oriented, right?
Mm,
So it was like even when I was not educating in my job or consulting or advocating. I was taking time to, oh, somebody wants to have a coffee chat, those ones.
Oh,
Right? So I was doing a lot of those. So like I was giving so much to everyone else that I wasn't able
but
to recharge. And if I can't recharge, what can I give to my wife? What can I give to my kids? Right? That's why I was there, but I wasn't there. And then, my wife, had the conversation with me, and then we separated. And over the last year and a half, her and I have had a lot of very frank conversations about what went down, and how we arrived at where we are now. And
yeah.
and I had to go, back to therapy and sort out some stuff and unpack a lot of trauma that manifested in like avoidant attachment style, and
Oh,
you know what I mean. So like,
oh, that
so
is deep. Okay, so you mentioned that for people who don't know, could you please, how do we call it, break it down a little bit more for the lay
yeah.
people?
So attachment style is generally how we respond to conflict, and how
Mm-hmm.
safe we feel with people, generally speaking. Some of us have secure attachment, where we tend to trust that others have our goodwill in mind
Mm-hmm.
when they interact with us. And then there are some who are more ambivalent, where they have difficulty discerning who to trust and who not to trust. Then you
Mm-hmm.
have people who have an insecure attachment style, who are
Mm-hmm.
generally, you know a mix of coming to you but also standoffish. Then
Mm-hmm.
you have the
Mm-hmm.
avoidant people like me, who are very much like distrustful, and don't. What's really funny is it's so easy for me to
Yeah.
come on a podcast or go on
Mm-hmm.
stage and tell my story, but when it comes to the personal, intimate relationship, it can be very hard for me to express what I feel to somebody that I care about deeply, because I'm scared of rejection, right? You know?
I'm not laughing
No,
at
no, I
you,
know.
but
It's just the irony of it, right?
it's the irony of it. And personally, being having been with somebody whom I communication, because I love to communicate, I love to get down to the root of things, and my mental health is really really important to me. So
Mhm.
when there is some, if I need to apologize to you, I'll apologize to you. If
Good.
I need to dig down deep and find the root cause of a problem, I'm a digger. I say I'm a digger. I would
Uh-huh.
dig down to the root, find it, let's solve that problem,
Mhm.
and then grow.
I love that.
However,
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 avoidant people,
yeah,
you become overbearing because they're trying to run away.
that's it.
And then they shut the door.
That's
And
it.
then a communicator like me is standing outside wondering
What's
why.
going on? Yeah,
It's a two-way street. But
absolutely.
what I didn't also realize that that was also a form of communication. But
Mm,
that wasn't the form of communication I was used to.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So, but this is what I find, that, and you learn the biggest lesson of it, or what happened, how it destroys relationships.
Hmm, hmm.
And yeah, and basically that is the relationship that it also destroyed on my side, but not as per me, but it,
Yeah,
it,
it's
that was why I was laughing. It's
yeah,
like,
yeah. I
does
felt,
he does he know part of my story?
I know it. I know there was something there, and
Yeah.
the psychology of the avoidant person is that
Mm-hmm.
it's not that they. So here, the two things I was most afraid of was, one, that if I have the challenging conversation that I need to have, that the other person is going to somehow shame me or run away, abandon me.
Mm,
But the other thing, which is probably even more powerful for me, is that the act of entering that situation is so emotionally overwhelming for me, is that I'm not sure if I can manage the emotional
mm,
impact, even if it's a conversation about, who's supposed to take out the garbage every week. But the fact that it's difficult and challenging, the trauma aspect. You know what trauma
Mm-hmm.
does that a lot of people don't talk about is trauma. It's like what's a good example? Trauma is if someone takes the speed limit off all the roads, where
Mm-hmm.
like all of a sudden like the emotion just goes crazy
Mm-hmm.
because trauma really disrupts your, especially childhood development trauma,
Yeah.
disrupts your ability to learn how to regulate on
And
a
cope
and
properly.
exactly.
Proper
So
coping skills. Yeah.
small things look like huge things, not just
You.
look like, they feel like huge things, right?
Yeah.
Because when you're a kid and trauma is happening, sometimes it was a small trigger that caused a huge thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and like my mom, she had difficulty because she was stressed and dealing with all the stuff, especially when she was in the height of her mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
The smallest things would set her off, and then there'd just be a lot of rage, right? And she had no control over it because it was the mental illness talking, right? But
Yeah.
when you're a kid, you don't know that, right? So you're just receiving the rage, and you're like, but why are you angry that
You're at me.
I asked you how your day was? you know um right? so
Oh,
it,
jeez.
it throws off your ability to predict how people are going to respond to you and how to regulate if they don't respond the way you feel they should. So
The more you talk about your mother, I know this conversation is not about your mother, it's
yeah.
about you. But the more you talk about your mother, the more I think about, you know, my past and the
Mhm.
difficulties and, my children bearing the brunt that they have no business bearing the brunt. It had all to do with me. But
Mhm.
I believe my only consolation was self-regulating and seeing that
Mhm.
I needed to get them out of my environment to
Mhm.
heal first.
Mhm. 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 That's
So
really wise.
I took
Yeah,
them out of my environment and they went to Ghana for about 2 years
love that.
for me to heal.
Can you send me to Ghana for 2 years too? Can I go? I need to heal. I need to go back home, man.
For me to heal before they joined me. And when they came, I was in a better frame of mind
Yeah.
and everything had, said. But unfortunately, I go to a counselor, a psychologist, and they tell me you're okay because I present solutions.
I, you know, I think sometimes when you're very good at rationality, it is
Yes.
hard for the psychologist to understand that you're not well.
In fact, one of them told me I should go do psychology. I should go do counseling psychology. Yes.
Yeah, right. So so anyway, like so
Back to
the avoidant
conversation.
thing, the avoidant
Yes.
thing. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, and I guess I'll say too, like none of this is my mom's fault, and I have no negative feelings toward her. We're still very close. Whenever anything happens in my life, she's the first person I call.
Mm-hmm.
She has my back. She's in my corner, and I very much
Mm-hmm.
appreciate and I'm very grateful for that. Family's complicated sometimes, but
It is.
that
Yeah.
love transcends everything.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, that the avoidance stuff. So you know, it's hard for one person to have a relationship. And in a relationship, you have to communicate, right?
That is right.
And I can say, oh, I didn't like the way my ex responded to my communication. I could say all of that, right? And, maybe some of that's true, maybe some of it's not true. But ultimately, my choice to not communicate was my choice to not communicate. And if I had been more comfortable or better at leaning into these more difficult, sometimes the conversations weren't even hard conversations, but in my head they were. But if,
Mm-hmm.
if I was more willing to lean into these things, we probably have had a happier union toward the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
But things change. We communicate a lot better now, so you never know how things can go. Uh, so
I like that
yeah,
one. I like that perception. You never know. You needed to learn your lessons and
yeah.
return back to
And
base.
and
Yes.
well, probably the big thing it revealed for me. So at first we separated. At the beginning of the separation, you're blaming the other person. They're blaming you. They're the problem, right? And then,
Mm-hmm.
after 4 or 5 months go by, you start to reflect, and you're like, oh shit, maybe I'm the problem, right? And you start to look at your own behavior because
Mm-hmm.
some of those things that existed in the relationship still exist in your life, even though the relationship isn't there
Mm.
anymore. So what's the
So
common denominator? It's just me,
so
right?
what prompted you? It's like, is it because the relationship ended or there were some triggers that you noticed that you needed to go back to therapy?
So when the relationship ended, that's a great question. When the relationship ended, um, I started to, for a while I was like doing okay. It's like you
Mm-hmm.
can mask for a while, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden I just wasn't okay anymore. And I was just having a lot of difficulty in every aspect of my life. I was having difficulty being a parent. I was having difficulty in my work life. I was having difficulty being a good friend, being a good sibling, son, all these pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to become angry,
Mm-hmm.
and I started to become sad, and I started to experience a shame that I think was always there. But when you have all these achievements and you do the TEDx talk and you're in the newspaper and you're on TV, it's easy to cover up the shame with the achievements,
A
right?
shame of what?
That's a great question, right? The shame wasn't real; it's just in your head, right? Um, and that's what I'm working on now with my therapist, right? And even with my own like journaling and stuff like that, that's what I'm working on. But I think the shame, a lot of that came from the stigma
Mm-hmm.
and the stigma of the mental health challenges, but also the stigma of being poor, right? Yeah. Oh, that's lovely, man. I like that one. That's dope. Where'd I get one like that?
I will see where
Yeah,
I got this and look for it.
yeah, it's
You're in
really nice.
Toronto.
Yeah, I'm in Toronto.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, all this shame started to come up,
Mm-hmm.
and at first I was trying to diagnose myself, which I know is the wrong thing to do. I've been working in mental health forever, so it's like you can't diagnose yourself.
I want to ask you, where do you work?
I work at an organization called Stella's Place in Toronto.
Oh, Stella's Place.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we do youth mental health for age 16 to 29.
Okay.
So anyway, um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a great organization. We do a lot to support the young people that we work with.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but anyway, um, so now I'm dealing with all this stuff. I start to get angry and I start to like become very not functional, just spending a lot of time on the couch. And I'm like, how can it's not working out for me as a parent, as in any way, shape, or form. So, and what really made me go back to therapy more than anything was the emotion of all this shame and stuff started to become so overwhelming for me. I remember I was in the car one time, I called my friend and I was describing to her just all the things that was coming up for me from my past, trauma that I thought that I dealt with that I hadn't dealt with,
Mm-hmm.
abandonment issues, and I just started crying. And like I mean, I'm kind of a sensitive dude. Like I'll cry at a movie or whatever, but it might like you know, but like in my regular life, I'm not like a crier. You know what I mean?
How
Um,
tall are you?
I'm 6'4".
Six
Yeah,
four.
6'4". I'm a tall guy, 6'4", 220 pounds. I carry some weight. you know. So imagine me now, this big ass dude, just bawling.
Tears streaming down
Yeah,
your
right.
face.
And I'm like, man, this I got
Yeah.
I gotta go take care of this, right? So then
Yes, yes,
you
yes,
know um
indeed, indeed.
I had a friend who had given me a referral about 4 months before that, and I reached out to them again. I'm like, hey, remember that therapist you were trying to refer me to? Can you give me that
Mm-hmm.
information again? I got the
Yeah,
information. 3 weeks later, 2 weeks later, I was back in therapy, and it's been it's been a game changer for me.
great.
Absolutely.
I'm going to ask you, so
Yeah.
is the therapist, the background of the therapist, how important was that for you or not
Extremely,
important? Yeah,
extremely.
break it down a little bit more.
Well, my therapist is a Jamaican woman.
Mm,
So, yeah, I mean, and it's very important for me because, it's when someone can speak your language, you
mm-hmm,
don't have to explain the nuances of your story,
mm-hmm.
right?
I'm going to take you back to your mom's story, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's going to make you laugh a little bit. So,
Okay.
when you started talking about her hearing voices and everything,
Hmm.
all that kept coming into my head was the Obia people have arrived.
Enough Obia in my family, I, I mean, the amount
No,
of times
they might have said that it's Obia people.
my grandmother would agree with you. You know what I mean? So, but
That was supposed to be a joke.
no, no, it's funny
Yeah.
because it's funny, but it's also funny because it's true, right? And maybe it's worth talking about the spiritual aspect of things, right?
Well, that's true. That's
Right?
true. Yeah.
Because I think that sometimes spirituality can be helpful and sometimes it can be not as helpful when and I say not as helpful because sometimes you start to attribute things to obia, for instance, when
Hmm.
what's actually happening is it's just trauma and stress, and people break down after prolonged trauma. And stress is going to cause anybody to break down. I don't care
Hmm.
who you are, how strong you are, eventually it's going to hit you, right? And my mom being extremely strong, extremely, like if I told you her story, like ridiculous. But still prolonged stress and trauma got to her, so the whole attributing it to something spiritual wasn't helpful, in the sense that maybe having more people say, hey, this is a real thing, we would have got to a solution sooner. But at the same time, spirituality can be really helpful because I think it's important to have faith. You know, in most of what I write, especially when I'm talking about like me and my story and my health
Yeah.
situation, at some point, and I'm not a religious person, but at some point, God and prayer comes up in almost everything I write, which,
It's a grounding.
yeah, right? So, despite not being a religious person, to have faith in the universe and faith in something watching over me, manifestation, like all these different things, it's like I'm here talking to you now. Like that's how helpful it is. You know what I
So
mean?
I think sometimes what we don't it's not the religiosity per se, but it's the spirituality of
That's it.
believing in a greater entity, a
That's it.
greater power, and how do we call it,
Yeah,
everything else.
and
But
it's beyond our conception. We want
yes,
science to explain it. We want the Bible or the Quran or the Torah or whatever to explain it, but there is no it's beyond our explanation. But here's the thing: is it exists because we
yes,
all had these experiences in our life
yes,
where either it happened in our dreams or we had a premonition, something came
yes,
through that dreamt about the first time,
or deja
or
vus.
deja vu. We'll see a random person that's not supposed to be where we are. They're supposed to be somewhere else, but all of a sudden they're like all these things have happened in my life, and so for me it's obvious
Hmm.
that there is something else out there beyond my
Hmm.
comprehension that
Hmm.
is shaping or impacting or at least
Hmm.
observing
Hmm.
the existence that we all live in. um So that part is really important for me. But yeah, coming back to the therapy thing,
Yes.
you just I thought the issues I had were with my mom,
Mm,
but actually the issues I had were, and now this one's gonna blow your mind. It blew my mind when I learned about it, and it came up in therapy. The issue I had was really about racism and identity. Not even identity, but actually just racism. Um, because I had
wow.
a lot of racial trauma when I was a kid, right?
Ah,
Like violence that happened to my family when I was a kid. And so the abandonment for me was society abandoned me,
mm,
because you want to feel safe in society, right? And then all of a sudden, the society that you live in, when you live in a predominantly white society, I mean, Toronto's a lot more diverse now, but when I was a kid, it was different.
yep.
People don't understand that. Like, when I was a kid, Toronto was not what it is now, where you walk down the street, you see every color in the sun. Back in the day, we used to talk about, you cannot go downtown by yourself because the skinheads are gonna get you, and that's because sometimes they did. And this is in the 90s. It's not like the 60s. Like, it's the 90s, 1994, 95, right? Um, and then it happened to my family. They got us, right? And so all of a sudden now you go outside and you can't trust nobody,
It's it's
right?
so it's so like I immigrated into this country in the 1998
Okay.
thereabouts, and
The
starting
transition phase. The transition phase.
the transition phase.
Yeah.
But so I came the next year. I was in university, and um, it was really, that was when you sat in class and you were the only
Mm-hmm.
sitting in
Yeah,
the
man.
class,
Yeah, man.
and I had a very tough time. And I think I'm a tough person, but I
Definitely.
had a very tough time mentally processing a lot of it, because I didn't have the language of race or racism. I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
my color when I came into this country,
Exactly. Exactly.
right? But the only way I survived was finding the, let's say, the Caribbean community, the
Mm-hmm.
like
Hmm.
people who have been here for a long time,
Yeah.
and actually spoken word saved my mental health.
Okay. 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 All right. Okay.
Because at that time there were a lot of places downtown you could perform.
Yes.
So whatever that's going on, you could write it, you could perform, and you could have conversations with other people who had the language to say that I've been through this is how it's called, and etc., etc. Before
Mm-hmm.
I even really got into the depth of what racism meant, discrimination, microaggressions, all through sociology
Yeah.
and equity studies, is like, oh wow, so this was it.
That's it. And I grew up with it, so I can't even imagine what it was like for you to come here and all of a sudden just, we sell people this dream. Canada sells a dream about what it's like to live here, and then immigrants come here and realize that the dream is, it's a lot more gray area in that dream than
It,
Canada
it,
explains, right?
it is, most especially when I started my profession, and I started working at one of the downtown hospitals, and having this east how do you call it, east, one of these patients from the eastern countries,
Mm-hmm.
Eastern Europe. I didn't realize how blatant racist the person was, but her actions were blatantly racist.
Mm-hmm.
The person that spoke for me was this Italian woman who
Mm-hmm.
said, I know you didn't do this, I know you didn't say this, you were very polite, etc. And she provided allyship for
Mm.
me, but I really didn't process it. Years later,
Yeah.
and this is the danger of an angry black woman. I lost it one time. And when I lost it at work, I realized that, like you said, it was piled up years of this trauma, microaggressions, racism, and
Mm-hmm.
then one day I just exploded.
Mm-hmm.
But people don't know
Mm-hmm.
that I've been carrying this for 10 years, 20 years, 15 years, 20 years. They don't know. So, like
Exactly.
you said, yeah, we
Exactly.
all
And
need some therapy.
trust me, we anyway. I'm gonna leave that one there because I was gonna say that the perpetrators need the therapy the most. I don't understand hating people that you don't know. I don't get it. But um, for me, the racism, trauma, the way I understand it, is it's a betrayal of what you thought was supposed to be safe,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
And so now, yeah, I'm an immigrant, but I came to this country when I was young, right? And when they
Mm,
say, it's funny because now with like I have a baby and I watch the TV shows that he's watching, and
mm,
they celebrate police so much. It's like a noble job and all of this, and in if in an ideal perfect world, police would be exactly what they say on TV, right? They
mm,
protect us and they're noble, and you know, but that's not the experience that I had. And but beyond that, all of the
mm,
systems sort of operate in a predatory way towards black people, right?
yeah.
And so by the time I hit 7 years old, I started to realize that wherever I went, they were all against me. No, not they were all against me, but in the sense of
Mm,
like, it felt like they were all against me because some of them actually were. And you just didn't know,
mm.
and you didn't know which ones were going to be the ones who would hurt you and which ones would be the ones who were cool and be allies. So, and the harm
So,
could
would you trust?
exactly. So you just avoid all of them, right? And then,
Wow.
and then but then when all of your opportunity in the gatekeepers are the from the dominant majority, how do you navigate when you don't feel safe with the gatekeepers who provide you opportunities,
So,
right?
how do you do that? How did you do that?
I wrote this essay about it. I learned how to be a safe person, which I'm not proud of. They say like the safe black person, that kind of thing. And I mean a lot of it came naturally because I smile a lot, and when you smile, people who are prejudiced tend to be more comfortable with you. Um,
Then I think I'm guilty of that too.
but are you guilty of it, or here's the crux of it, right? Is that,
Okay.
and this is the conflict I still have, is that if you had removed my need for safety from the equation, maybe I would have been even more joyful and smiled more, right?
Oh, okay. How about this? The presentation of safety, but then there's an underlying thorn. Don't cross it.
Yeah, yeah. Which I had. I mean, and when kids try to
Then we
cross it,
can all be happy.
and when that's it, because you're always looking out for the danger,
Yes.
right?
Oh, jeez.
And
Oh, man.
we call that hypervigilance, and
I
and
am.
and when you're in, so the way like the nervous system operates is that if you're in danger, your body is supposed to respond to get you out of the danger. So you run faster, you get stronger,
Mm-hmm.
you get a little bit more focused, you think quicker so that you could get out of the danger, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're hyper vigilant, that means you're stuck in danger all the time. And that's like your nervous system it's like if you're stuck in danger all the time, it's feeding too much electricity into the circuit and then it blows and then it doesn't work properly anymore, right? So when you're dealing with this hypervigilance, for me, with respect to racism,
Mm-hmm.
more than anything, that's what was throwing off my ability to regulate because I just felt like I was in danger all
The
the
time.
time. And sometimes I actually was. So it wasn't like I was imagining it,
I
right?
was real.
So then I felt abandoned by the world that I was living in because the world that I was living in was fundamentally not safe. And the places that were most unsafe were the places I needed to be to escape poverty.
I need to send you to Ghana.
You know, I'm
You
telling
need
you,
a
two
break.
years, 2 years.
2 years. You need a break. You
Trust
need
me.
a break. So you work in mental health now at
Hmm.
Stella's place. What made you study so was it because of this that you study psychology? Because somebody may have gone the other, direction. But this is what I see. Trauma does two things, or our experiences to trauma does two things. For some people, I'm still trying to understand.
Hmm.
It gets to them, it breaks them. And
Hmm.
for other people like yourself, like myself, we learn the lessons and then we kind of push, and become the voices, or yeah, the voices for other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for me, I guess the big motivation for me was always, so I mean, psychology. Yeah, I was just trying to figure out my own stuff. That's what gravitated me towards psychology. But
Self-diagnosis again.
that's how it started. That's how it started. Uh,
Yeah.
but once I got into it, I realized that one, I was actually not doomed to whatever existence I thought I was doomed to. Like I could get better, I could do better. And once I started to do better, I thought about, I started public speaking and telling my story. And everywhere I went, I was the only black person in the room.
I wanted to get to the public speaking part, but
Yeah.
since you mentioned it, like, so at what stage in university, what was it that said you need to tell your story on the stage? What went through your mind that you made that switch, that decision?
Uh, I didn't want to do it. Someone told me to do it, and I was too scared to say no to them because I needed the opportunities that they presented for my future. So that the first time I ever got on stage was I was volunteering, and I was like, this volunteer job can lead to a real job, and I need to make money. So they said, "Do you want to tell your story?" I said, "Yeah, I'll do it." And I was terrified because I still had the shame. So even though I was doing better and I'd already gone to therapy and I was working on my stuff and building tools, I still felt shame about my story. But then I got on stage in front of a few hundred kids, high schoolers. I was terrified, uh, and about 5 minutes into it, they laughed at a joke I made, and then I looked up because I was staring down the whole time. I wasn't looking at them. Then I looked up and they were all paying attention. And then eventually I got through the whole speech. It was half an hour. And then afterward, a bunch of kids came up to me and said, what you said, meaning me, was really helpful and I could relate to your story, or it was really brave of you, or now I understand things a lot differently. And
Hmm.
immediately I was hooked on it. I was like, whoa, I can have this kind of impact with
Yeah.
people. My story can help people, my experience, my knowledge, my wisdom, my intelligence can help people. um,
Hmm.
then this is what I'm going to do. And but then as I started doing more and more of that, it became not just getting on stage. It was, hey, Asante, we recognize you have these insights about mental health. Come to this committee meeting, or meet with this person from the government, or to go to the school board to talk about this. And every room I would go in, I was the only black person, or I was the only person who was raised in public housing. So it wasn't just I was the only black person, but I was the only, because sometimes there was other black people there, but um, again, when we talk about the whole safety thing, sometimes the dominant majority feels safer around folks who they might be black, and it's not. I'm not trying to diminish anybody's blackness. I just want to put that out there. They might be black, but they're more like us because they grew up in a suburban environment. Um, and I was not like that. you know. So, but I knew how to speak the language because I used to read a lot as a kid, so I could turn on the Queen's English whenever I needed to, right? Um, so I ended up in all these spaces, and this was at a time when people were just beginning to talk about mental health, and I realized that they were making decisions that were going to be the foundations of a system that they were going to build on. If I was the only black voice in the room, and I wasn't in every room, what kind of system were they going to build? So it was at that point where I became really serious about public speaking and advocacy, and not just talking about my story, but the impact of identity and race with respect to
Mhm.
mental health. And I've never been shy about that. And some people have called me racist, and some people have been very uncomfortable, and some people have cried when they've heard, the trauma that they have been complicit to, putting upon others, right? But I cannot be shy about that experience because it is my obligation in the position that I'm in to support decisions that are going to work for more diverse people than if the decisions are being made by only one subset of people, right? And it's not me saying like all white people are terrible or anything like that. It's not about that. Is if it was only women making decisions, or if it's only
Mhm.
trans people making decisions, or if it's only any disabled people, if it's only any whatever the group, if it was only one kind of person at the table making decisions, then you're not going to be able to have the breadth of experience at the table that we need to consider all the things we need to consider when we're building a system. So that's what it became about for me. Um, so yeah, I became that advocate, and
That
now
voice that was
yeah,
needed. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Wow. This is incredible. This is
yeah,
incredible. It's mental health is not an easy feat, and
oh,
when your sanity is very, very important, and many people, like you said, who are in the majority here are complacent about it. Even the language they use, their attitudes, behaviors, whether it's consciously or subconsciously that they're doing it, it has an impact on those of us at the receiving end. And at the end, we take it home, we brew it, we stew it, and then it becomes an issue. Or if you are somebody like me, I'll call you to the corner and just give you my piece.
yeah.
Let peace reign. Bye bye.
I appreciate that though. I appreciate communication is everything. So I'm what I'm working on now is being able to stay in conflict,
Mhm,
and not stay in conflict in a toxic way, but to show up for someone else's issues, because someone else has a challenge, then I
mhm.
think it's respectful for me to be able to show up. I'm not saying I'm always perfect at this, because I'm not, but I'm trying. That being said, I do need to run because I'm taking my older kid to a movie. So
Yes,
I'm
yes, yes,
trying to,
yes.
I'm trying to, do all that. But guess what? Hey, we could do this again, right?
Yes, we're going to do it again. We're going to do it again. Thank you so much. Thank you, Asante. Guys, you've been watching myself, Nanaya Yabua, on my podcast with Asante
Yeah.
Houston.
Yeah. No,
Houghton.
Houghton.
Houghton. And I've been
Yeah.
saying Houghton.
It's all good.
Houghton.
No, got it right now. It's all good.
Okay, all right. Asante, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. And
But
we'll be doing it again.
yeah.
We'll be doing it
Whenever you're
again.
ready. Whenever you're ready. I'm ready.
Most definitely. And I appreciate you. Have a beautiful
Thank you.
movie night with
Thank,
your family.
thank
All
you. I
right.
appreciate it. Okay.
Bye bye.